I can't whip anybody anymore. I'm broke down and crippled, but I figure he's got to be fucking 90 now.
The list.
I mean, he's so old. When he was in school, he didn't have history. So
how long is that list? Your ass kicking list? It's a long list.
No, I've shortened it up to old people, paraplegics, and midgets these days because I'm getting older and I've had too many injuries.
Have you taken anyone off the list? Has anyone graduated to maybe just general disdain instead of an ass whip?
I still hate a lot of people. I just don't want to fight them anymore.
Okay. Like Russo hasn't graduated to something else?
No, me and Vinnie Rue, we're fine now.
See,
don't try to
That's what I mean. Hasn't he graduated to a higher plateau?
Here's the thing. When we were in the WWF together, our ideas on what professional wrestling were so far apart that they actually almost went all the way around the world and met on the other side. But now I follow that not taking it so seriously method anymore.
Alrighty.
And we speak now.
Let's take that.
Not about wrestling. We haven't gone that far, but yeah.
I'm going to give you the champions right now. They'll be coming up on your screen. The World Heavyweight Champion for WCW now. This is at the time of the invasion. Here's where the titles were. Booker T won it on the last Nitro. WCW US title was also Booker T. The tag team titles were Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare. The cruiserweights was Shane Helms. Now, those are the 4 belts that WWFE kept.
WWFU.
The FU. The TV title was Duggan. That went by the wayside. Kidman and Mysterio were the cruiserweight tags. That went by the wayside. And Meng was the hardcore champion. That went by the wayside.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is that? 7 championships.
Yes,
in a company so they were losing less than $10 million per championship per year, basically. I'm not going to tell it. Here's the thing. It is amazing. WCW had 20 stars and 20 real good talents and 40 fucking schlubs on the roster. But the problem is, it wasn't the talent's fault. I know from being there in 89 and 90 that, I said at the time, if Jim Hurd had Hulk Hogan, he couldn't have drawn a house with him because they'd have figured out some way to fuck that up. Bischoff had an accidental epiphany of buying up recognized stars and doing an invasion angle, and it worked, and he didn't know how to follow it up. There's Bischoff right now, knocking on the door, going to serve you with some kind of papers. And it's a shame because, did Turner Broadcasting suffer? Did any executives get fired for mismanaging this company so badly that in 13 years they owned it, it only turned a profit too? No. They kept making their inflated salaries and all these fucking wrestlers were out of business. Even though they went in there and beat themselves up every night until some of them, frankly, decided it wasn't worth it and slacked off because nobody cared anyway when they did that, so why should they kill themselves? But you know what I'm saying. Let's go. Let's do it to it.
The floor is yours, Jim.
All right. Before we talk about rosters or anything, here, to me, if anybody disagrees, please, I encourage them to write, call, email, carrier pigeon, whatever. Sean here, because I don't want to hear it. No. They got to believe it. They have to believe it. If you are going to do an invasion angle, and in the days when wrestling, as we said, has been exposed and is viewed as just entertainment, or in some cases not even that, if you want to really draw big money, if you want to know why Dana White and the UFC is kicking Vince's ass on pay-per-view, it's not only because it's real, but because it's wrestling. The UFC is professional wrestling without the predetermined endings. They have the grease. Referee's got oil on him. They had that one. They had the double knockout finish where they both hit each other at the same time. They both go down. The reason why these are old, trite, cliched wrestling finishes is because they legitimately at one time did happen, or they legitimately could happen, but they've been done to death in wrestling by bookers and talent throughout the years who just couldn't come up with anything else and decided to just go with the same old shit. Which happens to everybody, and it's even happened to me. But the UFC is professional wrestling with guys that aren't allowed to trash talk each other. And the crowds for the UFC, when the underdog's making a comeback, they sound like the old 70s wrestling crowds. Are you old enough to remember that?
Yes.
Were you just
yes.
a gleam in your father's eye or a stain in your mother's panties when that, but... So UFC and Dana White are kicking Vince's ass on pay-per-view because People want to see a fight between two people that they think are tough and that they are kind of interested in, either in liking or disliking. So the first thing is, if you're going to have an invasion, they have to believe it. Now, in the days of internet and exposés and etc., how do we make them believe something? Not all of it. They don't have to believe that everything's real. They just have to have a doubt, a smidgen of doubt, the suspension of disbelief. If Vince McMahon had come out on March 26, 2001, at the end of Raw, fuck Nitro, put a Mighty Mouse cartoon on that night. Actually, put on something that says turn to fucking Raw. I don't know how they would have done it, but they just showed Raw. The last half hour of the show, Vince McMahon comes out, and he says, I have finally done it. After 17 years of fighting a war with those reprobates down south. Ted Turner, billionaire Ted, I squashed you like a bug. I own it all now. Me, Vince McMahon, I own wrestling. I have purchased WCW. Boo, hiss, whatever. Because Vince, for all anything else anybody can say about him, is one of the great heels of all time on television. And in person maybe sometimes too. I own wrestling. I squashed billionaire Ted. I've purchased WCW. I've purchased their assets, purchased their name, their intellectual property, and I've purchased their wrestlers. And now that I've gotten rid of you out of my hair, billionaire Ted, now that the WWF stands dominant as the greatest wrestling company on the face of the planet, everybody's got to be wondering what's going to happen to your favorite wrestlers. And I know that some of you WCW fans down south there, because he condescended, he might well go ahead and come out with it. He hates Southern people, looks down at them, so let's go ahead and come out and say it. You're probably wondering what's going to happen to those wrestlers that you like, the wrestlers, and some of the WCW wrestlers. They're probably wondering, well, what's in my future? Well, the simple answer is, you don't have any futures, because I own you. I own you lock, stock, and barrel, and by the time because I know all of you WCW wrestlers, night in and night out, you were out there on the road, you were appearing in those VFW halls, those bingo halls, and those parking lots, county fairs, and you were trying to put me out of business. I hold you just as responsible as I do billionaire Ted for trying to put the WWF out of business when we tried to bring entertainment to the families of the masses around the world. So, since I hold you just as responsible as I do billionaire Ted, WCW wrestlers, I'm going to make sure you pay for that first. I own you for a year. I bought this company, I bought everybody's contracts for 1 year. And in that year, you got your choice. You can go home. You can go home. You don't have to work for me. You don't have to put up with me. You breach your contracts. If you do, you don't get paid. And what's more than that, since I basically own wrestling, you'll never work again. Or you can stick around for the next year and you can get paid on those fat, inflated contracts that those morons down in WCW signed you to. Know you're not worth it. But for that money, I promise you, you're going to roll over and play dead for everybody on my roster. We will beat you like a dusty rug at spring cleaning. We will make sure that by the time that year is up, that nothing is left of your careers, that the fans would rather see Mickey Mouse than see any of you. They won't pay a dime to see you. That's going to be my revenge. That's how I'm going to get even. I've destroyed billionaire Ted. I've purchased WCW. And now I'm going to take his entire roster down with me. Blah, 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 right? All of a sudden he's interrupted. Mr. McMahon, I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's Eric Bischoff walking out the entranceway. Mr. McMahon, because once again, Eric Bischoff, and that's the great thing about wrestling. When people are really pricks, you can just make them heels and they make money with it. Eric Bischoff comes out and he says, Mr. McMahon, I'm glad that you have realized what's been going on. And I'm glad that things have come to this. I'm glad that I don't have to work for that no good Turner Broadcasting anymore. And I'm so glad that you've realized that it was the wrestlers' fault all along. I tried to run a good, wholesome, honest company, but it was those wrestlers, the whiny wrestlers, always in it for themselves. I'm glad to see blames being put in the proper place. I just want to let you know, Mr. McMahon, that I almost had you there once, but you got me, Vince, if I may. You got me, Vince, and I'll tell you, if there's anything I can do to help make this transition a little smoother, don't hesitate to call on me, Eric Bischoff. You can just call me Easy E. And by the way, I just like to say that if you have any spots in middle management in the WWF for someone with some experience, well, I'm certainly open to discussing those. I'm just on your time, Mr. McMahon, on your time. Vince looks at him whether he don't know whether to wind his ass or scratch his watch, and he's starting to think about this when all of a sudden there's a big commotion. Up about halfway in one of the breezeways into the arena, and all of a sudden the fans are screaming. Here comes, everybody knows who this is, Ric Flair, down the steps.